Among the many soldiers who fought one of the most infamous clashes in American history on June 25, 1876, the Battle of the Little Bighorn, known to many as Custer's last stand that day, was a man of peculiar reputation. Charles Camillo DeRudio, an Italian aristocrat turned U.S. Army officer, known mockingly as Count No Account by Captain Frederick Benteen for his boastful tales and aristocratic airs, DeRudio was both admired and resented among his peers. Though promoted to first lieutenant in December of 1875, he never quite earned the trust of Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer or many of the 7th Cavalry's senior officers. On that fateful summer afternoon, the 7th Cavalry under the command of Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer faced the combined might of the Lakota Sioux, Northern Cheyenne, and Arapaho. Yet fate had its own plans. When Custer divided his forces that fateful day, DeRudio found himself at the heart of chaos, fighting for survival, witnessing the horrors unfold, and later emerging as one of the rare men to tell the tale firsthand. This is Charles DeRudio's account of Custer's last stand, his memories of the smoke, the gunfire, the desperate retreats, and the haunting aftermath that would etch this battle into history. His account of the battle, one of survival and harrowing witness, remains among the most detailed ever recorded. This is his story told through his own eyes of how Custer's final campaign unfolded and how fate spared him on a day that claimed so many. Before we continue, like, share, and subscribe to our channel to help our community grow. The morning came on dry and bright, the kind of light that makes every blade of grass throw a shadow. We had pushed hard for days, and by June 25th, I could feel the campaign in my bones, the ache in my knees, the rawness on my hands where rains had cut through sweat. I rode with Company A in Major Reno's wing of the regiment. The air carried that familiar smell of sun-warmed sage, horse leather, and dust fine as flour. Word moved along the line like wind through grass. The scouts had found an enormous village, Lakota, Northern Cheyenne, perhaps Arapaho, camped along the Little Bighorn. Some men scoffed, others fell quiet. I had learned long ago to trust scouts when they spoke about what lay ahead. They read the earth the way a clerk reads a ledger. Signs in the dust, cut grass, a single moccasin print where no soldier would think to look. As we neared the divide, a breath of wind carried the faintest hint of smoke. At first I told myself it was our own dust playing tricks, but then I saw it a thin smear on the horizon. Some said it was a signal, others said that it was campfire smoke from the village itself. Whatever it was, it told us we were close. The Crow and Aristocrat scouts were uneasy. I remember one of them riding up face set, eyes scanning the low hills as if they expected warriors to rise out of the earth. He spoke of a village big enough to cover the valley, of pony herds so thick they looked like dark water. Around me, troopers shifted in their saddles, tugged at canteens, checked carbines. No one wanted to be the first to say it, but all of us felt the same tightening in the gut. We moved at a steady clip mules of the pack train, cursing the trail behind us. Carbines clacking, canteen cups rattling like tin insects. The sun climbed to its hard place in the sky, and the heat came down. Sweat ran beneath my blouse and dried into salt. I chewed the leather of my glove without thinking. The taste stayed with me the rest of the day. Rumors worked their way through the ranks, and with them, the measure of our commander's intent. Custer pressed for speed. He wanted to strike before the village broke up and scattered into the breaks and draws. That sense of urgency took hold of us. It quickened the column. Still, even urgency cannot turn a mule into a horse. The pack train was our anchor, and the line stretched long. Across those miles, the land seemed empty, but it was not. The buffalo grass swayed and hid, draws deep enough to swallow a platoon. Creeks ran in tight curves, their banks cut with willow and cottonwood, and every fold of earth promised either safety or ambush. I had known battle before, but this country fought on the side of those who knew it best. At the divide, the scouts pointed toward the Little Bighorn Valley. To the eye, it was a beautiful sweep green along the ribbon of water, dun and gold across the high ground. To a soldier, that beauty had edges. You could not see into the bends, you could not count lodges or estimate the strength of men waiting just out of view, but you could feel the numbers in the ground, hoof churn, cut trails, camp refuse dragged out and scattered. Signs do not lie. We halted briefly. Officers gathered. I saw heads bent over the ground as if a map were spread there. In truth, the map was the country itself. Ridges, river loops, the timber groves like islands. Orders passed down the line with their usual alchemy whispered a word to movement. Major Reno would push ahead with his wing, Benteen angled off on a scouting vector to the left, and the pack train would follow under guard. What Custer meant to do beyond that was his, to know and ours to carry out. I checked my Spencer habit more than mistrust, and ran a finger along the sights as if smooth metal could promise a straight shot when it mattered. Men around me spoke in low tones about ammunition, about canteens nearly empty already, about how fast the ponies in that village might run if we surprised them. Someone laughed too loudly and then looked embarrassed. That more than anything convinced me we were close. The first line of ponies we saw was just specks against the river green, a dark seam that moved as one. Beyond them, smoke rose from a dozen places. I will not pretend we could see the full measure of that camp from where we rode, but the scale announced itself in pieces, the size of the herd, the breadth of the timber, the number of trail cuts into the valley. Each fragment added weight to the day. Custer's tempo increased, messages moved back and forth. We trimmed the line, closed the intervals, and the column shed its traveling posture for something sharper, more intent. I tasted dust and kept my seat light, the way we all did when a march turned into a fight. You learn to carry your fear low away from the hands. Around midday, the heat pressed down like a hand. Even the larks went quiet. The land offered no shade but the promise of timber along the river, and that promise lay ahead of our orders. We were told enough. Contact was imminent. The rest would arrive the way battle always does, sudden, too close, and louder than you remembered it could be. As we crested a low rise, I caught a final, clear look at the valley. The river bent like a thrown rope glittering in the sun. The village lay beyond, stretched along the water in a length that made my mouth dry. If there was any doubt left in me about the magnitude of what we were riding into, that view drove it out. We had found the host we sought only now. The question was whether we had found them or they had found us. The order came down the line sharp as the crack of a whip. Major Reno will advance. I felt the shift ripple through the battalion, 3 companies, about 140 men. Troopers tightened cinches, spat dust, and muttered to one another. There was no mistaking it. We were going in. Reno rode ahead, face drawn, mustache bristling, the weight of his orders plain upon him. His voice carried back, "Men, keep your intervals. Steady. We'll ride them down." Someone behind me, a young trooper named Harris, whispered, "Ride them down." "There's more smoke down there than chimneys in Bismarck," another muttered. "Keep your teeth together, boy. We'll be home by supper." We set off at a trot, dust rising in curtains about our knees. Ahead, the Little Bighorn Valley widened like a funnel, green and deceptively calm. The river flashed in the sun, willows along its banks quivering in the wind. But it was the far side that made my stomach go cold. A village sprawling for a mile or more, tippets like pale domes scattered across the grass, smoke rising in idle curls. One of the Arapaho scouts rode up alongside me, face streaked with dust, eyes fixed on the camp. "Too many lodges," he said in his broken English. "Too many ponies. You tell your chief." I nodded but said nothing. He had told his chief already. Custer and the man had pressed us forward all the same. As we descended, the first stirrings came from the village. Figures on horseback, dark against the river light, moving quick as thrown spears. More followed, then more, until the river bends seemed to spill them like floodwater. Reno raised his hand. The bugle shrilled. "Charge!" The line broke into a gallop. Our carbines were not made for shooting at speed, but some men fired anyway. The reports lost in the thunder of hooves. The warriors came on, not as a disordered mob, but with deadly grace. Cheyenne lancers cutting across our front, Lakota riflemen swinging wide to flank. Their ponies were painted, some with white handprints, some with zigzag lightning down their flanks, and their riders leaned low, using the animals for cover. We fired volley after volley, but for every rider we unseated, 3 more swept from the willows. The open valley betrayed us. Nowhere to anchor a line, nowhere to hide from the encircling tide. "Keep firing, damn you!" a sergeant bellowed. "Don't give them the ground." "Lieutenant," Harris cried to me over the gunfire, "they're in the timber." And so they were streaks of color slipping between the cottonwoods, muzzle flashes winking from the shadows. Reno wheeled us left, shouting, "Dismount! Form line! Dismount!" We swung down, hands moving by drill. Left man holds 4 horses. The rest take position, carbines up, breathing hard. For a few moments the line spat fire. The Springfield carbines cracked, levers worked, smoke hung low. Warriors wheeled off, regrouped, came on again. Their numbers grew, their courage hardened. The air thickened with powder smoke and the metallic tang of blood. I saw Corporal Thompson stagger back, a shaft buried in his thigh. his mouth working but no sound coming. Another trooper fired point blank at a rider who came within yards of the line, the horse collapsing in a heap that almost bowled me over. "Hold the timber! Hold the timber!" Reno's voice cut across the chaos, but there was a tremor in it now. We fell back among the trees. The cottonwoods offered momentary cover, but the pressure never eased. Bullets snapped from three sides. Arrows sang overhead. Somewhere to my right, a man was praying aloud, each word punctuated by a shot. Time lost meaning. Minutes were hours, and then came the shout none of us wanted to hear. "Retreat! Mount up to the river." Reno had decided, or perhaps fear had decided for him. There was no bugle, only the surge of men breaking for the water. "Lieutenant, the order?" Harris looked to me. "We fall back," I snapped. "Keep your carbine high and your head lower." We plunged from the timber into the open. Warriors closed behind us, their cries rising like a storm wind. Bullets struck the shallows, kicking water into mist. Men went down, some in the mud, some carried by the current. And as I reached the riverbank, rain slick with sweat and mud, I knew this was no fighting withdrawal. This was a rout. Chaos erupted as Reno's skirmish line buckled under the withering fire from the warriors pouring across the valley. Bugles blared, "Fall back to the timber." We spurred our mounts toward the dense cottonwoods along the Little Bighorn. Branches whipped our faces as we pushed through, the underbrush offering a fragile sense of cover. Horses whinnied, men shouted, and bullets tore leaves from the trees. Captain French shouted, "Hold this ground. Use the trees for cover." Bloody Knife yelled above the din, "They come. Many, many Sioux." I took position behind a fallen log, my carbine hot in my hands. Smoke stung my eyes as we fired volley after volley into the advancing tide. The timber shook with the sound of gunfire. For a brief moment it felt as if we might hold. Then the order came again. "Mount up! Retreat!" The timber was no longer safe. Warriors were circling behind us, cutting off our escape. In the confusion as men scrambled to their saddles, my horse reared wildly, struck by a bullet. I was thrown hard against the roots of a cottonwood. My head rang, the world spinning. "DeRudio!" "Come on!" Lieutenant Wallace shouted, but the retreating column was already moving. Horses crashing through the river, men shouting in panic. I stumbled to my feet, my carbine still clutched tight, but they were gone. Reno's battalion had left the timber. I was alone, surrounded by the shadows of the cottonwoods, the war cries growing louder. The river crossing was now a death trap. Bullets hissed through the leaves above. I dropped to my belly and crawled deeper into the timber, hoping the chaos would hide me. The timber swallowed me whole. The thick cottonwoods and tangled brush offered some protection, but they also hid dangers of their own. The air was heavy with the smell of gunpowder and the sharp tang of sap where bullets had torn through bark. I crouched low, my heart hammering against my ribs as if it wanted to break free. My revolver felt slick in my grasp. Sweat, blood, or both, I could not tell. Around me, the timber was alive with movement, snapping twigs, rustling leaves, and the faint, almost ghostly whisper of moccasins on the forest floor. I was not alone. Somewhere nearby, Sergeant O'Neill had taken cover behind a fallen log, his breathing ragged. A trooper named Thomas crouched beside a tree, his face pale and streaked with grime. "Captain," O'Neill whispered hoarsely, his voice barely more than a breath, "we can't stay here long. They'll sweep this place soon." I nodded, my eyes scanning the shadows. Through the dense foliage, I could glimpse fleeting figures, warriors moving like phantoms between the trees, their war paint flashing in the dim light. A sudden crack split the air. Thomas fired his carbine, the muzzle flash, lighting his terrified eyes. A warrior dropped to his knees, but the shot was a beacon. Instantly, a chorus of shouts erupted from the brush and bullets chewed through leaves and bark around us. "Fall back! Keep low!" I hissed. We scrambled deeper into the timber, ducking beneath low branches, our boots sinking in the damp earth. Behind us, the chaos of Reno's shattered line faded into a distant roar. For a moment, I lost sight of the others. Alone now, I pressed my back against a massive cottonwood and listened. The forest had become a labyrinth of echoes. Hoofbeats in the distance, the clatter of loose stones, the hiss of wind through leaves. I dared not move. Every sound seemed amplified. The rush of my own blood in my ears, the distant cries of women and children in the village, the occasional eerie trill of a war whistle. Minutes felt like hours. Then footsteps, soft, measured, close. I held my breath. A shadow flitted past, not 3 yards away. A Lakota warrior, his hair adorned with a single feather, scanning the brush with sharp eyes. I froze, willing myself into the tree, my fingers clenched around the cold steel of my revolver. He paused, sniffed the air like a hunter, then moved on. Only when his footsteps faded did I dare exhale. That was when I realized I was separated, cut off from my command, deep in hostile ground with no clear way back. The timber, once our refuge, had become my prison. The sun had long set behind the distant ridges, leaving the valley wrapped in a heavy cloak of darkness. I lay pressed against the damp earth, my heart pounding with every sound. Every rustle of leaves felt like the whisper of death creeping closer. The timber that had once promised cover now felt like a cage. I dared not move more than an inch at a time, for the Sioux and Cheyenne warriors were out there searching, listening, waiting. "Stay low, stay still," I murmured to myself. My breath fogged faintly in the night air. The forest was alive with sinister echoes, the crackling of branches under unknown feet, the distant calls of night birds, and just once, the muffled cry of a wounded horse somewhere along the riverbank. Suddenly, a branch snapped nearby. I froze. Two dark figures emerged between the cottonwoods, their shadows long under the moonlight. They spoke in low tones, their language unmistakable. Sioux, not one carried a rifle slung over his shoulder, the other held a tomahawk loosely in his hand. "Search here," one said in his tongue, though I could only catch fragments. They moved closer. My hand tightened on my revolver, but I knew that a single shot would betray my position. Instead, I pressed myself deeper into the hollow between the roots of a great fallen tree. Their footsteps came within a yard of where I lay. I could smell the faint scent of smoke on their clothes, mixed with sweat and earth. My heart thundered so loudly I feared they might hear it. But then, by providence or sheer luck, they passed on. The hours dragged like years. I dared not sleep. Hunger gnawed at me, but fear was a stronger sustenance. Night descended upon the valley like a heavy shroud, thick and impenetrable. The Little Bighorn River whispered beside me, its dark waters reflecting only a sliver of dying light. Every now and then, I thought I saw the glint of a distant fire through the trees. Perhaps they're campfires. Perhaps my imagination will dawn ever come. I whispered into the cold night. The cold gnawed at me. My fingers were numb, my throat parched, yet I dared not drink from the river. It might reveal my position above. The stars glimmered with indifferent clarity, their ancient light mocking the chaos below. I thought of my comrades, Benteen, Reno, Custer. Were they alive? Had they broken through or been swallowed by the endless waves of warriors? The night offered no answers, only the oppressive weight of survival. At one point, a faint rustle came from behind a twig snapping. My grip tightened on my revolver. "Who's there?" I whispered, barely audible. A figure emerged, crawling low. It was Private O'Neill, his face pale, uniform torn. "DeRudio, is that you?" O'Neill whispered. "Keep your voice down." "How did you escape?" I asked him. "Lost my way in the retreat. I saw you slip into the timber. The rest, I don't know," O'Neill responded. He collapsed beside me, chest heaving together. We lay in the darkness, sharing silence more than words. Speaking too much risked discovery. Moving too soon invited death. The night stretched on. Coyotes howled in the distance, a haunting chorus to the massacre that had unfolded hours earlier. Every nerve in my body was alert, straining for the slightest hint of pursuit. I knew that if we survived until dawn, we might yet find our way back, or at least avoid a Sioux knife in the dark. At one moment, I closed my eyes not to sleep, but to remember. My wife and my daughter, Parisian streets, a world away from this haunted plain. What cruel fate had brought me here, hiding among the trees like a hunted animal? The river murmured on. The stars wheeled slowly above, and we waited in silent, breath shallow until the night gave way to the faintest hint of dawn. The first light of day broke with a pale, almost merciful softness, a sharp contrast to the horrors it unveiled. I had survived the night, but survival came with a price, the chilling clarity of what the darkness had hidden. As the fog lifted from the valley, the battlefield revealed itself in all its harrowing truth. From my concealed position, I could see the ground littered with the bodies of men I had marched beside, eaten with, spoken to, even laughed with just 2 days before. The stillness of the morning was pierced not by the usual chorus of the plains, but by an unsettling quiet, broken only by the distant cries of scavenger birds. I knew I could not remain much longer. Every minute in the timber increased my chance of being discovered. The Sioux were still present, though fewer than the night before. Their victory had been claimed, and now they roamed the field, gathering spoils and tending to their dead. From afar, I saw them move from one fallen soldier to another, stripping uniforms, taking weapons, sometimes pausing for rituals I dared not interpret. My mind raced. Was there a chance to reach our lines? Had Reno or Benteen regrouped, or had they too been swept away? Every choice was fraught with risk: remain hidden and starve, or move and risk being seen. Suddenly, a flicker of movement caught my eye. A rider on a distant bluff, not Sioux, but one of our scouts, cautiously surveying the ground. My heart pounded. Salvation could not be far, but neither could the danger. I decided to wait a little longer to let the sun rise higher to read the field. The timber still provided cover, but it also bound me to this place of death. As the day grew, the magnitude of our defeat became undeniable. The trail of destruction stretched far, broken lances, torn flags, and the unmistakable sprawl of what had been Custer's command. I could not yet see him, but I knew somewhere on that field lay the man whose name this battle would forever bear. As the first light of dawn filtered through the trees, I felt my body stir with renewed hope. The endless night had finally loosened its grip. My limbs ached from the cold, my throat was raw with thirst, and my mind swirled with the ghosts of the screams and the thunder of rifles that had haunted me in the darkness. Suddenly, faint but unmistakable, came the sound of hoofbeats, not the wild, swift rhythm of the Sioux warriors, but the measured, deliberate approach of cavalry. My heart leapt. I peered through the undergrowth, and there, like a vision, I saw them, Major Reno's and Captain Benteen's combined forces, advancing cautiously along the riverbank. I staggered from my hiding place, my voice cracked and desperate. "Here, over here," I shouted, waving my arms. A young trooper saw me first. "Lieutenant DeRudio," he called, disbelief in his voice. "We thought you were dead." They rushed to me, their faces grim, their numbers far fewer than when we had last charged across that river together. I collapsed beside them, every muscle in my body screaming for rest, but my mind still reeling with what I had seen and endured. We found a few other survivors in the timber, some barely able to walk, others wounded and delirious, but many more were gone, vanished into the smoke and chaos of that dreadful day. As we rode back toward the safety of Reno's defensive position on the bluffs, the full horror of the battle came into view. The ground was littered with the fallen, both soldiers and warriors, silent now in the pale light of morning. The air still carried the acrid tang of powder smoke and the distant cries of victory from the Sioux village across the river. I could not help but look toward the distant ridges where Custer had gone with his 5 companies. I did not know his fate yet, but deep in my heart, I feared the worst. The silence from that direction was too absolute, too final. Back in the encampment, the men pressed me for news, for explanations, for comfort. I told them what little I could. The decisions, the orders, the sudden fury of the attack, it all replayed in my mind like a fevered dream. That evening, as the sun sank once more over the Little Bighorn, we learned the truth. Custer was gone. All his men were gone. The ridges were a field of death. I sat alone for a long while, the weight of it pressing down on me. We had set out on this campaign with banners flying and bugles calling. We had believed in our mission, in our leaders, in the inevitability of victory. But here on this blood-soaked earth, I had learned a different truth, that war cares little for plans or bravado, and that survival sometimes demands nothing more than a will to crawl, to hide, to endure. When I reflect on the battle, I see how ambition and overconfidence led us into the jaws of death. Custer was a man of immense courage, yes, but also of impatience. He divided our forces, underestimated the enemy, and rode headlong into a valley that would become his grave.